What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to show you how I made these beautiful, delicious, smoky, saucy, tender, amazing Mop Sauce offset ribs. Coming up, this video is sponsored by Texas Pete. These are some ribs. Pat them dry. And what I got here is a beautiful rack of full spare ribs, which is my rib of choice. They're much bigger, much meatier than a baby back or St. Louis cut, although St. Louis cut is the same thing, but just really trimmed up. Speaking of which, we do need to trim this up. Starting on the back side here, take off this skirty flat meat, nothing to it. Save this for making sausage or whatever you like. Next thing we need to do is take off this breastbone right here, just a little tiny one, go right between the bone and the cartilage and just make a nice straight line. This is where a nice big heavy duty chef's knife comes in real handy. Highly recommend it. And of course you could just get yourself some St. Louis cut ribs and save the trimming process here, but spare ribs are a lot less per pound because you're paying someone else to do all the butchery. It's kind of like chicken wings in that regard. And it's real easy to do. Flipping it over onto this side, we're gonna take off this muscle right here, because as you can see, it's meat, then fat, then muscle. So by the time this fat renders out, this top piece is just gonna wanna slide off. But you know, if you're just cooking in the backyard, you don't really need to take it off, but it'll make it look nicer, cook up better in the end. Very nice. Next up, we're gonna trim up this really thin end here, take off this baby little last bone if we can find it. Thinking right about there is pretty good. And lastly, we just need to give this thing some shape by taking off this thin end and just making it overall look nice and pretty. Just like that. Always round your corners. And that is looking pretty good to me. Again, the main difference between this and St. Louis cut is that St. Louis cut would be cut right at the top of the bones, so you'd have a nice square presentation, but we'd lose all this nice knuckle meat up here, which is very tasty stuff. And it appears that the membrane is already removed from these ribs, which is fine with me. If I had the choice, I probably would have left it on, but honestly, the way we're gonna cook these today, I think that membrane might get a little chewy, so probably a good thing. Not too worried about it. But as you can see, it does not take much time to trim up a full rack of spare ribs, and these are looking absolutely beautiful. Let's get these seasoned up. Now, because this video is in fact sponsored by Texas Pete, a North Carolina-based hot sauce called Texas Pete, I figured we'd do a little North Carolina-Texas collaboration, borrowing techniques from each style of cooking to make an absolutely fantastic rack of ribs. So as far as Texas goes, that's why we're going with the full spare rib. We're gonna be cooking it on the offset with post-oak smoke, and of course, we're gonna be seasoning it with just salt and pepper. Starting on the bone side with a nice handful of some kosher salt, just a nice even layer all the way across. Ribs are pretty thin, so we don't want to go too heavy on the salt, but I do like to eyeball it separately as opposed to mixing it together. And of course, some 16 mesh black pepper. Again, just a nice even coating. Not going nearly as heavy as I would for something like a brisket, but just a nice dusting. Oh, beautiful. And same deal on the top, trying to fight the wind a little bit. And if you really want to be particular, you can go a little bit heavier on the thicker side and a little bit lighter on the thinner side because there's more meat over here. Ooh, yeah, beautiful stuff. A nice little snowfall. And when it comes to ribs, I like to experiment all the time with different rubs, flavors, and sauces. But today, all of our flavor is going to be coming a little bit later, which is why we're keeping it nice and simple with just salt and pepper. And do your best to not miss those sides, folks. Come on. Although it really doesn't matter so much on ribs because these are gonna plump up. Looking good to me. Let's fire up the pit. I don't care whether it's Texas or Carolina. The only thing I'm worried about is that pesky little snake in my boot. And as you can see, just in the amount of time it took me to get that fire started, that salt has drawn out plenty of moisture from these ribs, which is really gonna help all that pepper stick, which is why I really don't see a need to use a binder on things like this. But anywho, on the pit we go. We're gonna aim the thick side of the ribs towards the fire, right in the middle here. And we're gonna keep this pit nice and smoky for the first little bit, probably around 250 degrees. I might close that damper off a little bit to send some more smoke backwards to really make sure we're getting lots of smoke circulating around these ribs, which is gonna help them get nice and smoky and flavorful, but also help with the color a little bit. So we'll check back in a little bit. So as I mentioned, we're doing a Texas Carolina hybrid rib today, and so far everything we've done has been very much Central Texas style. You know, we've got the full spare rib, salt and pepper only, cooking on an offset with post oak smoke. So to add some more Carolina flair to the equation, we're gonna do one of my favorite things and bust out a mop sauce. You've seen me use mop sauces all the time on this channel. It's one of my favorite ways to cook, and you see it a lot in the Carolinas on whole hog, pork shoulders, ribs, pork steaks, whatever it is they're cooking, and typically it's done over direct heat. But one thing I've never tried, surprisingly, is using a mop sauce on an offset, and I don't see any way that it's not going to come out fantastic. So let's go ahead and bust one out real quick. Starting with going in with about a stick of some butter. Ooh. And once nice and frothy and melted, we're gonna go in with our roughly chopped white onion and just let that cook away for a little bit until they soften up. And once nice and softened, but not too browned by any means, just looking nice and translucent, we're gonna go in with our crushed garlic. Let that cook away for a little bit. Oh, smelling so good. Nothing better than butter, onions, and garlic. Am I right, folks? Come on. But at this point, we're gonna go in with some spices, including some dry mustard, some paprika, and some freshly cracked black pepper, because why not? Let those infuse with all the fat and butter for just a minute or so. And right when you're worried that those spices are gonna burn, we're gonna go in with some white vinegar, as well as some apple cider vinegar. About a cup of each. And once that's up to a simmer, we're gonna go in with our sliced lemon. Just trying to make a really nice, flavorful, bright sauce here, keeping it nice and thin. I'm gonna throw a shot of Worcestershire sauce in there too, just for good measure. And then, of course, the star of the show, some good old classic Texas Pete hot sauce. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Texas Pete. It really is a fantastic sauce. It's just got that perfect balance of bold pepper flavor with heat and perfect amount of tang, and it's a staple pantry item in this household. It's readily available. I pick it up at the local grocery store, and I've been using it in barbecue recipes for years. If you check out any of my whole hog style cooks or any of my direct heat pork cooks, it always makes an appearance. I think the last time I did a pulled pork video, I just used Texas Pete as a finishing sauce, and it just works out so well because even this mop sauce is a balance of vinegar and heat and tang, which is a very similar profile to what Texas Pete is by itself. I use this stuff all the time, whether it's for chicken wings, making a mop sauce, finishing pulled pork. A lot of times I'll just put a little spray bottle in here and use that to spritz ribs. Gives great color while bringing some really nice tang and of course some heat. But it's not too hot, it's not gonna blow out anyone's palate. It really is a perfect everyday condiment. And the guy on the label's wearing a big red cowboy hat, just like me. Highly recommend it, folks. I'm sure you've had Texas Pete before, but if you haven't, you definitely gotta go pick some up. It really is an essential part of the barbecue arsenal. Oh yeah, and you can go pretty heavy because this is diluted with vinegar and whatnot. But obviously, taste it and adjust because the mop sauce is all about just adding some brightness, some tang, some heat, and some acidity. And you can doctor this up however you like. If you want it spicier, you can go heavier on the Texas Pete or maybe throw some cayenne in there. If you want it more mild, you can always thin it out. So again, big shout out to Texas Pete. Thank you for sponsoring this video. I would have used this sauce regardless of if you were sponsoring this video or not because it is just so tasty. But we're gonna bring this sauce back up to a simmer, let all these flavors kind of come together, let those lemons cook down a little bit, and our mop sauce is almost done. So at this point, our sauce is looking great, but it still is a little bit thick. So I like to add some liquid to add some more volume as well as thin it out a little bit. And you can use pretty much whatever you like, some water, some light beer, apple juice would be a great choice. And that's kind of the beauty of this recipe is you can really dial it into whatever you have on hand or whatever flavor profile you're after. Looking good. You know, it's kind of interesting to think about. A lot of people will make barbecue ribs with all the same components that are in this, but just in a different way. You know, using a rub that has paprika and garlic and onion in it, and then spritzing it down with apple cider vinegar. All the same ingredients, but a different technique. And this sauce is just gonna cook onto the ribs and be absolutely fantastic. And if you were to taste this right now, it should be super bold, very tangy, a good amount of heat depending on how much you put in there. But remember, it's there to complement the smoky fattiness of the ribs. After a quick taste test, I adjusted this a little bit. I threw a bunch more Texas Pete in there, but forgot to hit record. Probably about half a bottle total. And we're also gonna go in with some brown sugar. That's just gonna really help with all the acid we've got in there. Just help balance this sauce out a little bit more. Beautiful. And there we go. Classic chuddy mop sauce. 2 hours into this rib cook, and these ribs are looking absolutely beautiful. Got some real nice red color on there. The bark is set, looking very nice and smoky. But if we look at the underside, it's still a little white. So I'm gonna flip these over for a little bit, get some smoke on the underside for probably about an hour, and then we'll start hitting it with the mop sauce. About 45 minutes later, got some lovely color on the underside, so it's time to hit this with some of our beautiful mop sauce. Just look at the color on that, nice and red. Let that drain for a sec, and just up and down, folks, nothing to it. And basically what's gonna happen is this is gonna soften up any of the crispy edges, and all this sauce is gonna cook on. And we should end up with a lovely texture on these ribs, and of course, some beautiful flavor. Love it. 2 mops and 25, 30 minutes later, these are looking absolutely beautiful. So now we're gonna flip them over so we can start mopping that top side. Ooh, loving the color of these already. I always say it, folks, there's something just so fun about mopping some meat. Adding some lovely flavors, smelling so good. Beautiful. Just gonna let that cook on. Probably gonna bump the temps up to around 300 at this point and just keep mopping every 15 minutes or so. And here we are right at hour 6, and these ribs are coming off the pit. Ooh, feeling so nice. Definitely got a little bit darker than I was anticipating, but ooh, very hot. Gonna go ahead and give these one final mop. Like I said, I've been mopping about every 15, 20 minutes or so, and it's just cooking on lovely, kind of just dehydrating and forming a little barbecue sauce on the outside. And surprisingly, it has not made a big mess in my smoker, which is great. Beautiful stuff. So to finish these up, I'm just gonna wrap them in some foil. That's just gonna help them steam a little bit, finish cooking through. Get a little mop sauce on the underside while we're at it. And wrap them up. Beautiful. These are still feeling a little bit tight. I tempt them around 180, 185. So I'm gonna pop them back in for probably another 20 minutes, and that should be just enough time to get them nice and soft. So after about 20, 30 minutes on the pit, these came up to temp, were probing nice and tender. I pulled them off, and now they have rested down to about 150 degrees internal, and it is time to slice on in. Ooh, nice wiggle factor. Oops. Oh no, don't mind if I do. And I gotta say, that is a beautiful looking rack of ribs. Nice and saucy, nice and juicy. Beautiful red color on there. The ends definitely got a little crispy, but sometimes that happens. I could have taken this other bone off and that probably wouldn't have happened, but yeah, I can start to slice on in. I'm gonna slice these upside down as I typically do. Beautiful stuff. Gotta say, the underside of these ribs definitely got a little darker than intended. Maybe that membrane would have helped out after all, but nice, juicy rib. Beautiful color on there. Pretty happy with how this is looking. Nice bone pullback on there, and nice and tender. I mean, what's not to like here, folks? We got a thick, glazy mop sauce on the outside, but we still got a beautiful smoke ring and some nice, tender ribs. Oh, I gotta dive in. Now, as far as ribs go, these definitely got a little bit darker than I would have liked, but all in all, they ended up looking pretty good at the end. Nice and red, not too dark on top. Beautiful smoke ring on there. I think next time I do this, I'll probably wait a little later in the cook to do some mopping on there. But all in all, smelling good, looking good. Let's see how they taste. Looks like a good rib to me. Oh yeah, perfectly tender. Ooh, it's a very saucy rib, I'll tell you what. It really doesn't look like it from here, but that sauce cooked on in so many different layers. It is pretty unique because this flavor profile I usually associate with direct heat cooking, you know, like a pork steak or a whole hog or something like that, but to have it on an offset with that heavy post oak smoke is pretty unique. Not gonna lie though, I like the tenderness on that. Clean bone, love to see it. Even though it looks a little crispy and burned around the edges, like on this little burn end guy, looks black, but it's still just completely shreddy, tender, and soft because of the mop sauce, you know? Ooh, very nice stuff. Ow. Oh, that top meat, that knuckle meat. That's why you get spare ribs, not St. Louis, folks. So good. Beautiful bite right there. Ooh, these are some fantastic ribs, and I'm definitely gonna do these again.
Can I mop it for you? Oh my god.
I think it's already pretty mopped.
That might be a bit too much. Fat ribs, Fat Tuesday.
All right, y'all, without further ado, I think it's time for the official taste test. Grab a nice little chunk off the bone. All right, y'all, and that is it. That is how to make some absolutely fantastic offset, smoky, mop sauce, Carolina/Texas style spare ribs. Flavor-wise, this was spot on. Not to mention, this style of ribs can work on any cooker. I've done it on the grill, I've done it on the direct heat cooker, and now I've done it on the offset. So no matter what you got, I highly recommend giving this technique a try. But all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Let YouTube know by dropping a like on this video. If you give this recipe a try for yourself, be sure to tag me on Instagram at Chuds BBQ. I'd love to see what y'all are cooking. Big shout out to all the Patreon members. Thank you for supporting Team Chud and allowing me to keep making all these videos. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace!